And we're live. So welcome everyone. I'm so excited and pumped to have two legends of the sales world on with us today, Scott Leese and Richard Harris. Welcome to the show, you guys. I feel like you both don't really need an introduction because most people listening probably already know who you are. But for the sake of those who might not know who you are, could you give us a quick little blurb about who you are and where you guys have been?
Thanks for having us on, first of all, Travis and Kevin. This is Scott speaking, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know. I'm Scott Leese. I run my own sales consulting business and co-founder of Surf and Sales with Richard Harris. And I've been building and scaling sales organizations for the better part of the last 20 years or so. First half of my time was in San Francisco Bay Area, and the last 9 years or so has been in Austin, Texas.
I'm Richard Harris. If you didn't know, thank you for the nice introduction, Travis. Been doing sales training for the last 8 or 9 years now, and was telling Scott for years that he should be doing this. So I'm glad he finally did it about 8 or 9 months ago in October of 2019. And of course, now I get angry and jealous whenever I see him do something better than me, which is, like, wait a minute, I've been doing this 8 years and Scott just got that. But that's why we're good friends, I think, too, as we drive each other to be better, while also driving each other crazy. So I think we consider ourselves lucky to be good friends as well as business partners. I also want people to know that super excited because this will be dropping on the Surf and Sales podcast at some point, but Travis is the guy who's behind our scenes for us, and he's uploading videos, getting the content into all the systems. And so we couldn't do the 60 plus episodes we've done in 90 days without Travis's help. So Travis, we appreciate the time that you've dedicated to us. So we're more than happy to be here. This is at your request, so we're happy to be here. And Kevin, nice to meet you. I'm excited to learn about you and answer your questions too.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, no,
guys.
amazing.
Yeah, now Kevin, I feel like with the amount of knowledge and experience we have in this like collective Zoom room right now, we can go in so many different directions.
Dude, I could cross the street with this much knowledge. Let's be honest. Come on now. I'm not getting anywhere free. Nobody's opening the doors during a coronavirus because the four of us are on a Zoom call.
Oh, man. Always got jokes. That's one thing I can always look forward to. Richard always got jokes.
Yeah, I'm always looking for a liner.
I love it. Kev, you want to kick us off? I know you had a couple of questions that we were chatting about before.
Yeah, so I mean, I obviously you guys teamed up on Surf and Sales, the actual remote conference, and then obviously turned into a podcast. I'm actually really curious because I don't know, how did you guys actually team up on that? Like, where did that start? Where did you guys meet? All that kind of good stuff.
You want me to tell the story? I end up telling the story all the time, but I am actually curious to hear it from Richard's perspective. So
you guys sound like an old couple already.
Yeah. We are definitely old. Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely. So we met actually in the last economic downturn in 2008. I was a VP of sales for a small tech company, security company. And with everything that happened, I got laid off. And, I had a $100,000 base and nice commissions. And I had a baby in 2008. In July of 2008 on our 1 year anniversary. September, we closed on a house. We closed on the day that all the money locked up, like literally where banks stopped giving loans. Moved in on Halloween, and then I got laid off mid-November of that year. And I went through a week or so of, applying for things and being freaked out. And then I took a big piece of humble pie and I called this guy who used to be my rep. And I'm like, hey, Tony, do you know anybody who's doing any hiring? And he's like, oh, you should go talk to my buddy Scott Leese. He's got something going on over in the East Bay out in Pleasanton. So I immediately LinkedIn with Scott, sent an email. I think I got your phone number and called you. I was all in on this thing and had some phone interviews and met Scott. And then he, graciously offered me the job. And it was I was being a manager of a team. So I was sort of taking 2 or 3 steps down. My salary base alone was cut in half to 50. And I think at that point, the company didn't even have health insurance, but I was so nervous and concerned. I was 39 And I was so afraid that, oh my God, I'm about to be 40. I'm going to be an old guy in the tech scene. And so I took the job with Scott. I was able to make it into something. Scott trusted me a lot. We got to become friends. Our wives became friends. Then we both have two boys that are all within 6 months of each other, between 12 and 10 at this point. And that's how we met, and sort of the families became friends, and we've gone on vacation to Costa Rica, which is, I'll sort of let Scott take it from there.
Yeah. So we had a, non-traditional Thanksgiving vacation with our two families a few years back in Costa Rica. And I was still working full time, and I was giving Richard shit basically about how he had to travel all across the country and, fly to South Carolina and Bosnia and all these places for these events and everything.
Serbia.
Serbia, whatever, one of those places. Right. And I sort of said, how come nobody has a, sales conference in a cool place like this, like right here, in Costa Rica, like someplace I actually would want to go. And we both had kind of talked about how we're not huge fans of, this like 500,000 person, 100,000 person, conference, and how cool it would be to do something a lot more intimate and more experiential. And so, we were out surfing in the water, and we came back in and kind of said something to our wives, and our wives were like shocked, like, well, that's actually a pretty good idea. And then, as often happens, like Richard kind of challenged me to, pony up and let's do this or whatever. And, the second half of that equation is I always end up doing it, right? Like I'm the easiest person in the world for him to bait into doing something. So, off we go. And like literally by the time we got home, like a couple days later, we had decided to do this surf and sales micro conference, and roped our buddy Jeff Coleman in, who handles all the back end logistical stuff, and plunked down some money and just kind of went for it. And it's been awesome. And we were hoping to do at least 3 or 4 events this year. We did sneak one in February, but we'll see what happens the rest of the year. But once this is all over, we'll be back and rocking those events.
Yeah.
Soon.
So Scott, just out of curiosity, Scott, how was my version of how we met compared to yours?
It's the same. Longer. You're more long-winded than me. So
that's true.
It was longer, but it's good.
The funny part is that guy Tony had tried to get me to hire Scott a couple of years ahead of time.
Richard wouldn't give me an interview.
I wouldn't even give Scott an interview.
They wouldn't take the interview.
And we didn't even remember that part of the story till last summer, till almost maybe 10 months ago when Tony told us. And we were like, oh, that's so.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, like, one of the things that I'm curious about too is like, as you've gone over the years, right? Like, this is a lengthy relationship you guys have been through, right? Like, talk to me a little bit about like teaming up on the podcast recently, right? Like, you guys both, to my knowledge, didn't come from a world of content and media creation, and yet here you guys are with 50 plus podcast episodes, audience of over 5 figures, right? And doing something that most people look at and I'm like, you have to clone yourselves. We were talking about this before, Scott. Like, how do you guys operate and do so much? Like, you guys are in so many different places, you're doing so much at once. Like, how do you do that?
Well, first of all, I have been accused of having 2 speeds, one of which is full speed ahead and the other one is dead stop. So I'm not good at doing anything kind of in the middle. And so I'm always like, yeah, we can do it. Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, I can do that. And I just book my time up constantly. And Richard is much more conscientious of, slowing down and taking care of other things in our lives and whatnot. So there's a bit of a give and take there. Like, I think I kick Richard in the ass and make him do more than he might do on his own. And he's kind of pulling me back, quite often as well, which I think is healthy for any, friendship and relationship. I think, have that kind of give and take, but I don't know. I mean, I have a really high motor and a really strong work ethic. And I think, that the things that I went through early in my adulthood with my illness and all that, like, I haven't lost that sense of urgency, so I'm just always operating on, like, I got to do this now because I don't know when I'm going to have another opportunity. And I'm a serious competitor, so I look around and, pay attention to what people are doing. And, I don't think I'm more talented than anybody at all. But I think that I can outwork most people. And that's kind of what some of my philosophy is on that. I heard Richard say I'm definitely not more talented than anybody.
No, actually, I'm going to say that I think you are more talented. I think that you're more talented, but I also think you're not an asshole about it. You don't walk around as a bravado, like, I'm smart. It's like, oh, that guy did that, I could do that. That's a good, like, you accept it as a challenge, not as a, oh my God, how did that guy get away with it? How did they get away with that? I couldn't, right? I probably have that more than Scott does. I'm probably the one who's like, wait a minute, I've been doing this for, years, and all of a sudden this guy's showing up, like, for whatever reason, for whatever daddy issue that is that I have yet to explore in therapy, that's there for me. But I agree with Scott that there's our opposites are definitely an attraction for both of us. There are definitely times where I've had to sort of say, Scott, don't do that. Like called him out on something, or he's called me out on something. And I think we both know, I think I learned it probably more from my marriage than my relationship with Scott, that sometimes even good friendships get messy. And I know it's weird to hear guys say that stuff, but Scott and I do. There's many times we're like, hey man, I know Scott's illness. I'm like, how are you doing? Like yesterday, I just like, dude, I haven't asked in 2 weeks, how are you feeling? Because I just know he goes through his ups and downs, right? So I think that's a huge piece, is that we do try to connect off business as much as people see us sort of as a partnership on things.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say is, I think one of the ways that people can get a lot more done is to just stop thinking and stop analyzing and strategy. I mean, everybody is so big on, like, let's strategize and let's do this right and all that kind of, I'm like, yo, if somebody gives me a good idea, like, let's fucking go. Like, I don't wait. I don't think. I don't overanalyze. I'm not crippled by, fear or anxiety with that. I don't worry if it's going to blow up in my face. Like, I'll deal with whatever consequence, right? So, like, if we decide right now to, go live on LinkedIn with this, and, because it sounds fun, let's see how many people we can get, and like, nobody watches, it's like, who cares? It's not going to bother me, right? Where I think some people will be like, well, how are we going to build an audience for it? And we have to promote it. And we got to make all this collateral. It's like, no, you don't. You know what I mean? Like, Richard and I have no fancy podcast equipment. Neither one of us has a fancy mic. We don't have no background. We don't need intro music. You know what I mean? Like, this is like the Ramones, okay, in CBGB, in some dark, dank club.
Love it. Right? That's us.
That's
Ramon.
Yeah, that's who we are, man. With what we do, we're scrappy, make do with what we have, not overblown, right?
No, that's the funny thing. I've been thinking about doing that's how this came about. I've been thinking about doing a podcast. John Barrows is a good friend of mine. I'm like, dude, like, I know you're doing a podcast. Like, is it worth it? He's like, and John just kind of looked at me. He's like, dude, people like to hear what people have to say, and they do. And he's like, you've been doing this long enough that there's no reason you shouldn't do it. And I thought about it. Then I was in Austin. Scott and I had, again, we were like, hey, let's go do one of these events. And we did it at Vets Recruiting. Let's see if we can get people to show up. Like, we just sort of did it. We figured out how to create a Zoom landing page and an Eventbrite page, and
which is like a huge accomplishment for us.
Right.
We are technically challenged.
So we were there, and I'd been thinking about this podcast, and I remember we're sitting out on the porch at Scott's house and with his wife, and I'm like, hey, I'm thinking of doing a podcast. And I said, the thing I want to do different is, I said, I want to do it like Netflix style, where I drop a bunch of episodes. Scott jumped out of his chair. He's like, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's genius. And then I thought about it some more, and I had said, Scott, and I was starting to see this trend in the sales training world that companies were getting bigger. the competitors were getting bigger. More people were coming into the space. And I was like, Scott, I think we're better together than apart on this. And that sort of was where it came from. And then we were even talking about the Surf and Sale, the name. And I said, Scott, what do you want to call it? And of course, Scott immediately wants to go to Surf and Sale. So I'm like, no, I don't want it to be all branded to that. Like, I want it to be about us. And we just decided to do it. And that was it. And the irony of it, the irony of all this was that I was actually recording this stuff in my garage, right? And I would put up a background, like I had ordered a green screen and everything for Zoom. Finally, I just got to the point where I'm like, screw this, I'm in the garage. And we would interview people like this. And they'd be like, Richard, are you in the garage? I'm like, yeah, man, like I got to make do with what I got. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, I'm sorry, we're just like, there's nothing fancy. We don't do bumpers.
No ivory tower podcast.
There's nothing. And then of course, and everybody would sort of give me a hard time. And now I'm just sitting back here going, ha ha, motherfuckers. Like, we were work from home before work from home was cool, right? We were already there. So,
but back to the marketing thing a little bit, because I actually think this is important point. I had this conversation with somebody the other day who was trying to build their own consulting business and was asking for advice, and they had given their business, like a name, right? And the name wasn't them, and they're not that well known in terms of their personal brand or their presence. And I'm like, dude, here's the problem I see is like, nobody knows who you are. And then nobody knows who this, company name is. That doesn't make sense to me, right? And if you look at, Richard's company name has his name in it. John's has his name in it. Mine's has my name in it, right? And so when we were talking about the podcast, I'm like, dude, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel with like another brand, man? Like just stick Surf and Sales on it. People already know it a little bit. And I think that's the way to go. And, luckily it's working good so far.
So I got a question for you guys, because I think it's interesting where you both went from these, really successful sales careers, sales leadership, everything. And then you both made a jump to go and build your own consulting firm, training firm. Like you wanted to branch out on your own. What led to that decision? What was it about, doing your own thing versus continuing to do what you were doing?
For me, I got fired. Like that was it. So
this is way easier for Richard, by the way.
But that's the funny version. People like it. But the real version is I was working for a very hot startup. It was getting acquired. My role was becoming redundant because it was going to like a Fortune. I would guess they were a Fortune 50 company. They didn't need my role. The company hugged me out the door. They gave me good severance. They covered my insurance for like 90 days. They did right by me and so that sort of happened. And I was going and applying to jobs and getting all these interviews, and I was talking to Scott about it, and I just couldn't close the interview. And then finally someone called me and said, can you help us do this? It was someone Scott had actually introduced me to a year prior. And I said, yeah. And I threw out this crazy number. And so all of a sudden I had a client in Austin. So I was going to Austin for 4 weeks. My first week flying home, I sit down on the plane next to this guy. As fate would have it, it's Nick Mehta from Gainsight. For those who don't know it, they're like, if it weren't for the coronavirus, I would assume they're going to go public this year or next. Massive in customer success. They had like 7 people at that time.
Arguably created the category.
Yeah, literally created the category. And again, that was just a fate thing. And so all of a sudden I had 2 clients, each paying me for 30 days of work. So I was making what I made in 6 months, I made in 60 days. And I called John Barrows and I said, John, what do you think? And he pushed me to do it. And I'm sure I talked to Scott about it and created a website and it just sort of went off from there. So fate just sort of intervened for me. And I had also been through, that was from 2008 was when I met Scott up until that was 2012. I'd been through so much in terms of jobs and looking for jobs and finding jobs and false starts with startups and stuff like that, that it was kind of like, I guess the world was finally ready to give me this shot, right? Like that this was the opportunity and I had to go for it. And then I loved everything about it. Like I loved how much I worked. I loved how much I didn't work. I was home from school most days. If I was in town, I was here when the boys came home from school. I got them out to school, traveled a bit, which gave us a bunch of flyer miles to take the family something. Like it just became this thing. I didn't ever have to ask anybody for vacation time. Like, like all these things that people think about, and it just sort of fell into my lap. So, and I had some guidance along the way. Scott was always there for me. John Barrows was there. Trish Bertuzzi was there. Definitely people sort of like, well, here's Richard. Here's what you might want to think about it this way. So that's how it happened for me. So,
and then for me, for 8 years, this son of a bitch has been nagging me in my ear to stop working for somebody else. I think he just wants somebody to shoot the shit with during the day, so he's not bored. And
I think that's true, particularly the last.
He wants to go on vacation, and I'm like, dude, I got to work. I don't have any PTO left. He's like, what the fuck are you doing, still working for somebody? Much more winding road for me. Kind of a combination of I had a bit more luck in some of the startups that I went to, and and building them out. But I'm also a chicken shit compared to Richard, in all candor, right? Like I don't, as fast as I make certain choices, like I'm pretty risk adverse in others, and so I had these things that I wanted to achieve and to get done and attain before I felt comfortable kind of going off.
But I think, Scott, I'll say this about you, is that you are financially risk averse. You don't like to take gambles on finances.
Yeah.
Right? And I think some of that's also built in because of the health stuff you went through.
Sure. I'm saving up for a real bad thing that I hope doesn't come,
or insurance, or, what's possible, are they going to start, doing away with pre-existing conditions under this new rule if you were to quit and go get your own health insurance? Like, what about your you have other things that sort of have forced you to be that way for a long time, right? The joke is that I'm always sort of low risk Scott. Scott is high risk Scott, and I'm low risk, and I'm high risk on the financial side, and Scott's very low risk there. When it comes to activities or trying something new, that's where I'm super low risk, and Scott's really high risk, right? And he'll take ideas, we'll talk about something, and he'll take an idea and he'll run with it, and he'll blow me away with it. And then I get angry because I'm like, well, I could have done that, but it's not, but that's our yin and yang. Like, that's just sort of how we work. And we respect it in each other, I think. So.
I think there's such candor too. Like there's self-awareness, which is amazing, but there's also just kind of transparency between the two of you. Like, you know what you both signed up for, like when you started work, and obviously it's been a long relationship between the two of you, but it seems like there's no filter almost.
Well, I don't think either one of us have much of a filter when we're apart, let alone together. and both of us have gotten in trouble many, many times before for that lack of filter. And look, we don't have any filter when we're talking about things together. We're both big supporters and proponents of employee rights and physical health issues and mental health issues and all of these kind of things. So I think there's a little bit of burden of responsibility, and we have some sort of platform, and so if we can't speak up on certain things, how can others, right? And so we just try to be real, man. There's no pomp and circumstance. We're a mess just like everybody else sometimes. So most of the time. Yeah, exactly.
I feel like one of the things also that cracks me up about you two is just like you guys are such just go with the flow type of guys. Like as I've listened to, so many of the interviews you guys have done, and just also sharing the mic with you guys today, like whatever comes in front of you, you guys literally will just paddle yourselves to the left or paddle yourselves to the right, or just push your ways through it. Like what did you like? How did you both get to that? Like, was it just years and years of like failure and adversity and learning, or like did you guys just come out the womb and you've always been these type of dudes?
I can tell you that I've always been that way. My mom were here, she'd answer that question. There's examples of me, going off to Washington, D.C. for like the Model UN or whatever, or my social studies class. And my teacher looked down at me, I was all dressed up. We were going to the Supreme Court. We got to go into the Supreme Court and watch them try a case. And it was a terrible case. It was about states' rights of who owned the waterway or something. So it wasn't that fun. But she looked at me and she goes, "Are you wearing slacks and loafers and no socks?" That's what my teacher said. I said, yeah. She's like, "Go back to the hotel and get socks." I said, "I didn't bring any socks." She's like, "I'm going to call your mother right now and tell her that you don't have any socks on." I said, "She knows." Like, my mom's been battling this problem for years, right? Like there's nothing there, there's tons of stories like that. There were times where my mom would like volunteer me to do stuff. And I think it took me 30 years. I'm like, "Mom, stop giving out people's phone numbers because I just moved to San Francisco and telling them to call me. Stop it. Like, stop doing that. I can make my own friends." Like, and she does, and she's doing it from a very nerd. Look, she's a mom, right? That's her job. I'll probably do it to my kids, but so I've always been that rebellious. And even, we belonged to the country club as a kid. My mom was like, "You can't wear cutoff shorts." And I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Well, what are people going to say?" And I'm like, "Mom, I don't care what people say." Like, I've had that attitude my whole life. So, which is also deep beneath all that, though, was also a big piece of some of my mental health and depression issues, which I will not talk about today, but I'm happy to another day. So there was a little bravado there, but it was really covering up some other stuff and some insecurities. Oftentimes when you do that, you're really facing it, you're avoiding an insecurity internally. So anyway, I don't know how Scott was. I assume he was because he was an athlete. So
yeah, well, I relate to the mom thing because every single time my mom sees me, she's like, "I can't believe you haven't shaved."
Right.
And I'm like, "You literally been telling me this for 30 fucking years. Like, you're going to lose this battle." Right. And then she listens to the show and she's like, "I don't understand why you have to curse so much." And I'm like, seriously, just let it go. Let it go.
My biggest thing is if I can get my mom to, I sort of have a mental game where I'm trying to get my mom to drop the F-bomb on every visit.
But I had a rebellious, streak, but it was less like, I think it was more just like confidence in myself and like a chip on my shoulder, right? So like everybody in high school, I can remember everybody freaking out and stressing out about the SAT, right? And how are you going to do? And you're going to go to college and, this means everything. And I have a real problem with people who are zealous about anything. I instantly go kind of the other direction if you're too much of a zealot. And so I literally took mushrooms the night before I took the SAT. And I went into the SAT the next day and I finished the fucking thing and I looked around and nobody else was done. I was the first person done. Right. And, I got my scores back and, I got a 1200 and I was like, I'll take it. Pretty good. Right. I've always just been like cool with like a B+, A-, like get me to the next thing. Right. And then, I'm in high school. This is a sports story in high school. And, I was playing 4 sports up until high school. And then like time constraints, the higher you go as an athlete, like more is demanded of you. Right. And so we're in tryouts basically in early practices for my junior year of high school basketball. And I've started to grow my hair out. And, the coach is like, "Dude, you got to shave your head if you're gonna play on the basketball team." And I was gonna be like starter, maybe the 6th man as a junior or something like that. And I'm like, I kind of laughed at him. I'm like, "Yeah, that's funny," And he was serious. He was serious, right? And I wasn't playing high school soccer at the time. I was playing competitive select soccer, and so I asked one of my buddies. I'm like, "Hey, how many days left are in high school soccer tryouts? Because like, I might tell this basketball coach to fuck off and go play high school soccer." And they're like, there's only 2 days left, man. And so I went back to practice the next day and he's like, basketball coach is like, "I think you need to get a haircut." And I'm like, "You know what? I'm out, dude. I quit." And I quit and I go to soccer tryouts and there's 2 days left, the high school soccer tryouts. High school coach doesn't really know who I am. All the players know who I am. They all know I'm good enough to be on the team. So I asked my buddy, I'm like, "What position is the weakest? Like, where's the weakest starter right now? What's going to be the easiest person for me to knock out, basically, right?" And so they told me. And the first time I had the opportunity, I flattened this guy. And he was a senior, and I just wiped him out. And the coach was like, whoa, way too aggressive. Like, who are you? You just showed up, you know, and I'm like, my name's Scott, and you're not going to forget my name. I'll tell you that much. And you know, they put me on the team, and I stole the guy's starting spot, and that's that. So I've always had that kind of mentality, man. A couple weird stories about me.
So how do you guys, is there anything you guys have done that, you know, whether it's sports, it's something growing up, like how did you guys apply those types of things maybe to like your professional lives to, you know, find success? Or was it just kind of being you, no matter what environment you were in?
Well, the chip on my shoulder is still there. It still motivates me. I can remember one of the first, you know, bosses that I ever had telling me that Scotty's little sales club, which is what he called my sales team that I was managing of like 15, 20 people. Scotty's little sales club is never going to work. You need to, you know, do all these things all this different way. I never forgot that. Right. And I've leapfrogged that guy in my career, you know, many times over now.
God, I might have to get you a t-shirt that says that for your birthday.
Please don't. And you know, I've left jobs that I was doing pretty well in and comfortable for risky things. All right. I left one startup in Austin for another one that was floundering that I thought I could save, and I did, and things like that. So there's that part of me that I think that's always been there in terms of proving people wrong. And whenever somebody tells me I can't do something, I sort of dig in and I'm like, fuck you. I'm going to do it more than ever. And, you know, I think that helps you as a salesperson, as a leader, and as an entrepreneur. You know?
I had the chip on my shoulder, still have it, but my chip was more about proving my parents wrong. It was all this pressure that I felt they were putting on me was me. No, I'm going to be in control. I mean, this went all the way back to high school, when we went from junior high to high school, I guess for us to middle school, from elementary to middle school. You know, it was like my parents wanted me to go to the private school. I didn't want to go to the private school. I told them that my parents were divorced, and I remember us meeting at the Burger King one morning for breakfast. We were going to have a conversation about why not going to Mount DeSales which is the private school, versus, you know, Central, which was the public school. And I said, I'm not going there. Lynn's already gone there and created so much trouble. I don't want to deal with dress codes. I said, you know, I was lucky enough that I was in the public school honor system, which was the equivalent of all the higher ed classes and AP and stuff. Like, I can get the same level of education at the public school as the private school. And at that time you really could. And I said, I'm not going in. If you send me, you're going to kick me. I'm going to get kicked out. So I just sort of said that. And so I must've been 13 or 14, some obnoxious little shit. And, you know, it goes way back. And it could go back to, so there was this chip on my shoulder about my parents controlling me and doing things, and then me wanting to be more successful than them. But through all that, for me, there was a lot of anger. So my chip on my shoulder was anger to my parents. And then through therapy, I've had to sort of readjust that chip, and I've become less angry, obviously. And I don't carry that chip as hard as I used to. I'm probably more addicted to the lifestyle than I am the proving people right or wrong thing. Like, I like what sales affords me in a life. So that's where I'm different than Scott, where Scott's hardwired that way. I don't think I'm hardwired.
Like my book, man, I'm just addicted to the process. Like, you could strip a lot of the money and stuff away, and like, I'm still going to be irritated that you're telling me I can't do something, and I'm going to try to do it, prove people wrong and whatnot.
Yo, I just got like 8 ideas about how to push you in directions, but I will hold those for later.
Please be careful.
Please go for it. Travis, give him one. Just give him one right now.
I'm working so much right now, and I will end up trying to delegate some of the work to Richard, and he thinks he's going to get away with it right now, but all of a sudden it's going to end up on his plate as well.
No, come on, Travis. What you got?
So the one that just came to my mind was that, like, sales is not a thing that's taught in college. Yeah. And like, you two could write the curriculum on sales. Like, Scott, you wrote a book, Addicted to the Process. And Richard, like, I literally followed neat selling when I first started selling. Like, when I was an SDR for the first time, I literally used that to like qualify. So if you were to think about teaching, or like, what would you do if someone was like, yo, like, how can you get college kids interested in sales? Like, what would you do?
That's a great That's a great
That's
question.
a really good question.
How do you get college kids interested in sales? That's the good question, because so many people like me just randomly fell into sales, never studied anything, right? I will say that there are some programs now that if they don't have full-on degrees, they certainly have specialties and like minors and things like that. So it's starting to get some traction. How do you get more
some mainstream action?
How do you get more kids involved in sales? I mean, number one, I think you work on the stigma around it, and the stigma being like still stuck around from the 1980s, sleazy car salesmen and Wall Street salesmen and, crooked, pushy people and stuff like that. And the profession is really evolved away from that and continues to evolve away from that. But there's still that stigma,
Here's how we do it. And now I'm going to challenge Scott, and he's going to be angry, right? So I just got, look at that. I hope people go back and watch the look on Scott's face. I just got asked to speak at St. Mary's College.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I know. So my goal, one of my goals, and I challenge Scott to this, and I know he'll like this, is because all these schools have had to go virtual. I know they're looking for more speakers or something to just dial in for 45 minutes and talk about something. So I've already reached out to the UC school at Haas at Berkeley. This one at St. Mary's fell in my lap, like many things do. And now I'm like, oh, I should do something with this. And now I'm giving this to Scott, and I already know he's like, I know somebody at UT. I know somebody.
I literally know somebody really high up at Haas, and all I can think about is I'm going to get the Berkeley gig and tell Richard to fuck off. I got you.
You're an asshole.
But that is genuinely, that's how we operate. Like, hey, we'll get this idea and it'll happen. And I can already tell Scott, this just got added to Scott's to-do list. I already know him. He's like,
this is where I need help. I need to remove this piece of DNA that here's Richard say he got the, thing at St. Mary's, which I'm very happy to hear that he got. But I need to remove the ability for him to goat me into me having to do all these same things now. This is a problem, man.
He didn't say nothing though. You said what you were about to do, and you were telling him to fuck off through your mouth.
That's how little he has to push me. That's how little it's like so at the surface.
It's amazing to watch, like the reaction. It was a little poke, like the smallest of pokes.
It's very gentle.
It's impressive, man.
Here's also what's going to happen. I'm going to get a call from Scott in a week. He's going to be like, dude, I got 10 of those. I'm like, what? You're gonna be like, did you at least get me in on one of them? Nope. That's how he'll get me back, and you won't get to see that, but that's what'll happen. So,
no, that's a really good question though. I think also you career path it. I think a lot of people think of sales just as like a gig, just as like a thing to do for this particular period of time to get me by until I can do what I actually really want to do, right? And I don't think there's maybe been enough storytelling and narration around, well, here's the progression. First, you do this kind of sale, and then you learn about this type, and then that type, and then you can go this operational direction. You can go this more account management direction. Mm-hmm. There's a leadership track. There's a Fortune 50 kind of track where you're doing $1 million deals. You can travel the world. You can, make good money. You can influence people's lives. You can give back to the community and teach all these other people the things that you know. Right? And I don't think that narrative exists,
Scott, you need to write that book.
Nah, here's what we're gonna do.
You just laid it out.
I'm a call narration here. If you decide to do that, I will personally interview you for your book, Scott. So you don't have to write everything down. I'll literally call you twice a week. We'll set aside an hour, and you can just talk. And
I want in on that one, though. He can't have that one by himself.
He'll give you some author notes,
some co-author,
some shout outs.
You can write the foreword, Richard.
Please. So I would actually go a step further. This would be my contribution to the book, is to say every single human being you know is in sales, and it started when you were 2, and you said, "No, I don't want that." Every single one of us. and it lasted all the way through life. It's still going on. Like even Scott's mom is still trying to sell him on shaving the beard, right? And Scott is trying to sell her back that it's never going to happen, right? Like it never stops. And I think to Scott's point about removing the stigma, if we kind of say, wait a minute, first of all, if you aren't in sales, like everything you do, you're in sales. You need to convince someone to do it your way at work. That's a sales job, right? You're trying to influence a team you lead in marketing. That's a sales job, right? CEO, it's a sales job to get people motivated. I mean, my hat goes off to all these CEOs who do startups where, they're selling a dream and a vision, right? Nick made us selling a dream to 15 people at Gainsight of this category creation. Like if that's not the ultimate sales job, I don't know what is, and there's lots of ways to do it. So I think that's how you remove the stigmas, by saying, look, you've already been doing it. And truthfully, you've probably been a sleazy car salesperson somewhere along the way. Some point you tried to convince mom and dad you wanted to go to spring break in Cabo, right? Some point you had to convince mom and dad, you wanted to go to a party school, not Harvard or whatever it was. Like, not that they don't party in Harvard, but, it's been going on for a long time. So I think you kind of have to remind people of like, wait a minute, I've done this and it's really not that bad. And then you can decide if you actually like it. So then you career path.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's such an interesting point. And like one of my early mentors, one of the first things I learned out of college, a guy named Mr. Jensen, rest in peace. He left us a few years back. But what he told me was, he's like, when you're thinking about business and you're thinking about sales, if you think about the fast nickel, or if you're thinking about the slow dime, at the end of the day, like you're going to pick your game. Like, do you want things to come fast and you want to be that one hit wonder and the quick seller? Or are you someone that wants to put in the long hours and like realize that this is an infinite game and you're addicted to the process, like you mentioned, Scott, and like this is the thing that you're moving towards? So like for me, luckily early on, I learned that being this like salesperson, I could touch operations, I could touch customer success, I could touch new business, I could touch engineering. I literally have touched almost every part of a company inside of each one of my roles. And not by like design. I was always the guy that was like, hey, like, what do you do over there in like machine learning? And like, how could that be applied to sales and what I'm doing? What could I learn from the 50 million sets of SQL queries you guys just ran last week to better identify who I'm targeting on a day-to-day basis? So like,
I want to interrupt you on this. So,
yeah.
you talked about the slow nickel and the fast dime, which is great. And I just wrote down a number that I know is in Scott's head. I'm willing to bet he can guess. Scott, based on this conversation, what number are you thinking about?
What number am I thinking about? I'm thinking about $1.
Right. Well, this is because this is how I know Scott. Scott's going to be like, wait a minute, I can still get 15 cents. Like, why can't I have both? Right. But that's how he's wired. And there are times where I will call Scott and go, okay, I got to go through these two decisions. And it's the one thing I know about Scott is like, oh, Scott wouldn't try to make one decision or the other. He'd try to figure out how to do both.
Yeah.
And
that goes back to that anti-zealot thing that I'm talking about. Right.
Yeah. And so
you gotta pick one or the other. Yeah.
And that's what I like. That's the piece of my DNA that I miss. And I finally realized that about in the last 2 years of like, wait a minute, how do I do this delicately? How do I play that? I'm not good at the politics game. Like I'm too straightforward. Scott's much better at that. And so that to me is what I see is really, really important on that entrepreneurial level at those CEOs I'm talking about is they actually kind of sit down and go, well, wait a minute, who says I can't have 15 cents? I can do both.
It's interesting, Travis, how like curious and inquisitive you are about all those pieces and, just always wanting to learn and all that. I was not that way. It took me a long time to even realize I probably should know more about these other pieces of the business. I was always just like, I'm going to stay in my lane right here in the early days, but you picked that up way faster than me. And it sounds like you're genuinely interested in all that kind of stuff.
Just for some wheels. These are business notebooks.
Yeah, I've got that stack too.
So like,
can't throw them away, right?
Hell no.
But
did you ever go back and look at them?
But I take notes as well, right? And I'm a huge note taker, but I wasn't taking notes about how engineering is set up and how product teams are set up, and I wasn't learning project management skills and all this kind of shit, right? Like I'm assuming you like dove into all these, topics. I'm just saying I didn't do that, and that's a mistake that I made, and so I'm just, it's interesting to me, and I'm curious how you had that at such a young age, if you will.
I think that's their generation, dude. Like, that's the difference between us at Gen X. Like, where Scott was able to laser focus, I ignored everybody. I thought I already knew it all. Like, I was never curious about learning. And I think the younger generation is why I like working with them. Is what they teach me is that it's natural for them to go Google something or YouTube something. Like, that's not natural. Like, the other day I was with a buddy of mine. We were in Tahoe and we had to put snow tires on the chain. And we were like trying to figure it out. It took me 10 minutes to go, wait a minute. I bet there's a YouTube video on this.
Yeah.
Like, whereas you guys would be like, YouTube, like, and like, these are the things that I'm just, that's what I love about Travis, right? And Kevin, as I learn about you too, like, I just love this curiosity, and the way you're asking these questions is far superior than I ever did at that age.
Man, Kevin's as old as we are. I can see some silver in his beard.
I'll tell you, the longer it comes in, the more gray it gets. There's nothing I can do to hide it, man. I'm just embracing it.
Hey, you gotta embrace it. You gotta let it go.
Yeah, you'll be all right. I'll take the grays out in the cover art. As you were saying, learning. It's funny as we're developing this show. Like, one thing that we've been going back and forth on is like the cover art and like what we're gonna use. And so, like, literally today, I'll send you both a picture after. But like today, I was literally teaching myself Illustrator and how to like actually draw cartoons. Like, I was doing that before. I'm almost done. I'm almost done, but like, it's to your point. Like, whenever there's something in front of me that I want to learn, I'm like, ain't no way anyone's good. Like, it's not that. I think everything's not that hard, right? So if you tell me that you don't think I can generate $250,000 in revenue in a week, I'm like, that's not that hard. Or if you tell me that I can't learn engineering or I can't be in marketing because I can
tell you this, Travis, you're not going to make that kind of money learning Illustrator.
Oh. That's the funny part, and I think that's the other like aspect of it. It's like, what of the skills that I've learned are actually applicable to generating revenue from a business standpoint?
The art of learning and the ability to be patient about creating this process and understanding it is good, but at some point you're gonna have to let go of that stuff, right? And Scott will tell you that, and I'm actually worse at it. I'm a little bit more like you, where I'd be like, well, let me figure this out, and Scott's like, I don't want to figure it out. Like, we've done 60 whatever episodes. If I said, Scott, go upload this, he'd be like, I don't even know where to start.
No idea.
That's me.
If you told me to upload it, I'd forward the email to Travis and be like, can you upload this for me?
So I have a question. I want to turn it back on you guys for a second. What spawned this idea for you guys to do a podcast?
So for me, right, like it actually is the learning, right? Like, for me, I get to have conversations with you two guys, right? Like, I get to get out there and talk to people and ask questions and learn, right? So for me, it really was just more of an opportunity to learn and just kind of challenge myself. Like, this is the first time I've done this, right? Like, this is so far outside my comfort zone right now. So for me, it's learning and growth, something different.
How about you, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been in like podcast creation mode for the last like almost 2 years now. And I've wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper because I've been this like community focused type of dude where I've interviewed community builders and facilitators and entrepreneurs. And I realized, like, at my core, like, I'm a business marketing, business development, sales guy. Like, that's what I am. Right. So when Kevin mentioned that, he had interest in starting a podcast, I was like, you know what? Like, similar to what you guys said, like, it's better to team up and put our heads together than try to do this thing apart. So we were like, look, like, let's figure out a name, created a little Google sheet that Kevin started. And then we just kept iterating on names. Then we were like, let's get our first guest. Then we got 3 interviews under our belt, had some amazing people on already.
We're not the first ones? We're not the first?
Sorry.
Wow.
You're like number 4. Number 4. I mean, you were actually the second booked. So we're the second booked, and you guys are like, we'll do it on the 10th. But like since then we've had on Morgan Ingram, Roderick Jefferson, and also I've just been trying to find people that have been there and done it in the space, right? And like, how can we bring a different conversation to the table is kind of where me and Kevin both landed out, right? Like, can you go get the
what are the differences between you two? What is the difference? Like,
so for me, I feel like I'm coming from the like on the ground approach, right? Like I've been the SDR and like that's kind of where my lane is, right? So the tactical on the ground emailing, like BDR perspective, and trying to also give like to that college point, the college question earlier about like what can college kids do? Like I want to show people that like sales is an area that you can go into and build a great career out of it. But like it's if you started early on, like I wish someone gave me the challenge of sale in college to read before I graduated. Like if I can be that person for people, like I will go home and sleep happy at night. But like I guess Kevin, I'd love for you to kind of share the other perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. It seems like when we talk about a topic, like we both start on from different ends of the spectrum or different vantage points. And like, as we talk through it, like we start to kind of like align and get on the same page. And then like we kind of catch momentum on something. So it's not always like right off the jump, we're completely in agreement on something or have the same exact opinion on something, but we kind of talk through it. And then all of a sudden we're like, all right, interesting. And when we have conversations, like it just seems like we catch a lot of momentum with our ideas and different topics and things we want to do or even just kind of explore and learn about. So I think, you know, like when we started this, we were saying to ourselves, we're like, how do we just get going? Right? Like Scott, to your point before, it's like you could easily just fall into like planning mode for 6 months and not do shit. Right?
Yeah.
So it was like, look, man, B's and C's get degrees. So like, let's do something that's going to force more action. So it was like, fuck it, get someone on the podcast, like schedule the first one. And then we're going to have to figure out a name. We're going to have to figure out, like, we're going to have to figure out the rest of this to get it going. So I think just in terms of like, there's some stark differences, but I also think it's just like, we work well together.
that's cool. That's great. I think that's how it should be, right? Just start and it'll get better, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, so that's cool.
Now you just have to produce 60 episodes in the next 60 days or whatever.
Yo,
like,
I mean, y'all, I keep telling y'all wrote the blueprint for two dudes that called me when I was on the phone in my basement and to talk about some of the things y'all were saying. And now to be where you guys are like 90 days later, I'm just like, this is the epitome of anybody that's either looking to get started.
Scott's gonna write.
What are you going to call it?
That's the next book. You've got 3 books you got to write coming out of this one episode, Scott.
How did I get into this podcast and I come out with 4 times as much work as when I went into it?
So Travis, I got a question for you, right? Because I think, you know, there's so much. I think people learn a lot from you two guys because you guys are out there, you're posting, right? You produce a lot of content, you're out there training, you're interacting. So people learn a lot from what you're saying. My question for Travis is, you've been working with these guys for a while now. What have you learned about these two from watching what they do?
Oh, that's a good question.
I like that. Yeah. I want to hear that one too. I'm going to go on mute.
Man, oh my God.
Be honest, Travis. Be honest about either one of us.
Yeah, no. So like the very first thing that I learned from both of you is this was like a huge personal lesson. Like, don't give a shit about what anybody else thinks. And that's something that I've struggled with because like, and this is something we kind of talked about a little bit, Kev, but like me being African-American in this tech space has been something that's always been on my shoulders. And like to see you guys day in and day out go on podcasts and literally not care what people think about what you say or the point of views you share or how you deliver a message, like that's something that I'm like, oh my God, like if I was doing this a year ago or 2 years ago and people really knew how I felt about whatever it was, like I would be so much further ahead than where I'm at right now. So that's like big thing number one for me. I guess the other thing that I've learned, like the tactical stuff is like a no-brainer. Like if you listen to either of you two talk, like I'm going to learn something. So it's not for me, it's not specifically about like, oh, like what did the neat sales model teach me, or what did, a multi-sensory experience in Costa Rica teach me? Like what could I learn from that? But more so like knowing when you guys are speaking to shut up and listen. Like when I was on the happy hour with you, Scott, like the second you dropped that story, I was like, notebook, what was the story? What was the thing? So like whenever I'm around either of you, it's just like shut up and listen, because I know you're going to provide value. And even if it's not tangible, I'm going to get a laugh or be entertained to some extent. So those are like the two big things for me. So
appreciate that, man.
Thank you. Thanks,
Cool.
man.
What?
I
So let's give him the opportunity right now, Richard, to say some things that he wishes he would have said and been a little bit more.
Yeah. What would you say 2 years ago?
2 years.
If somebody here, let me frame the question a little differently and a little more to the point. If somebody asked you 2 years ago, what's it like being an African American in the tech community, how would your answer be different, if at all, than me asking you right now, what's your experience like being an African American in the tech community?
Oh boy. So 2 years ago, I would have said this shit ain't fair, bro. I would have been like, there's no way that a kid could go put in so many hours outside of your company and then still bring you value and bring you results and still try to level you up after you've knocked him down repeatedly, time after time, to keep giving him a back seat and giving other people front row seats to success and growth. Like there's no way that this makes sense. And then to have it be in a moment to where literally you're teaching someone the wrong thing and it's agreed upon across the whole team that it's not what should be being taught, and this is not actually going to be effective for the growth and the success of your company. Like for me to stand up and say like I don't agree with this, and then to be shunned from a meeting because I said that, like that doesn't make any sense. So
that's the couple years ago,
yeah.
Right? Now, what about now?
So now I'd say like, Deborah, it doesn't even matter. Like if you can't understand that I bring value to the conversation and you don't like or agree with what I'm saying, then like you can kick rocks.
So
Like,
is it more than about just confidence in yourself than anything going on around you and around all of us, like changing in some particular way?
So I think it's like two pieces of that. So the first piece I'll say is it definitely is internal confidence. And it's something that I struggled with, especially early on in my career when I was doing everything right in my eyes, but I still wasn't getting the opportunities when I would still take back seats to other people just to say like, hey, like I know the team needs this. And so I'll go do that, even though it's like third down the list of what Travis wants. But because you're the leader and I'm a team player, I'm going to take the back seat and hopefully trust that you'll get me there. But that trust was put into the wrong people multiple times. And so like for me to get past that, it's like, it was hard.
Do you remember a pivot point, 6 months ago, 12 months ago, where like, I'm done with this attitude, or it may not be that specific, right? But when did you start to have an aha moment and kind of go, wait a minute?
Probably about like 3 to 4 months ago. And it's kind of been picking up steadily, right? And this podcast is another one of the examples of that picking up, right? So being able to talk more and share my ideas more and just being out there more is something that I was like, I used to get told not to go on LinkedIn because I have to get back to my activities. And I'm like, you just saw that this one campaign generated 15 meetings, but you want me to go make more phone calls. Like, why? Yeah. No, I don't want to make more phone calls. Like, you're rewarding all the wrong things. And so it was out of my control. Like, I couldn't go tell the CRO that, like, he's treating me bad. Like, it's just, one story of a sales rep saying and complaining. So, yeah, I've never gotten to, like, let those things out because I've always been afraid of, like, what it would, like, if I were to share these things about what happened to me, then would anybody want that type of person on their team? And yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to ask this question, and I'll be delicate, and hopefully I don't ask it the wrong way. So please call me out if I do. do you feel like some of that holding back is because, hey, it's not so much that I disagree, but it's also that I disagree, and someone might see me as African American first, not just as a human, right? Like that's look. There's no doubt that white privilege, whatever you want to call it from that perspective, right, has existed and stuff. But I'm curious to understand what that's like from your perspective, so that one, I can understand it, and two, people listening can kind of learn from it too. And I hope I asked that the right way. And if I didn't, I really apologize.
No. I mean, I think you were fine. But I think to answer your question, I think it's like a little bit of both. Like the one topic that I see and I have a very strong opinion about, but have not yet really spoken out about, is the diversity and inclusion topic. Like there was an event at a company that I was at that had someone of the opposite race, and they came in and did the diversity training, and it was literally like scratching fingernails on a chalkboard. Every moment was just worse and worse and worse, to the extent that I raised my hand and asked, like, what race does Travis sound like to you? He was like, well, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, I know, me either, right? Like, who would have guessed? Like, what am I? Like, I don't fit into your boxes of people names. Like, I'm sitting right in front of you, and to get so upset, to feel like I can't even control myself in a work environment. Like the fact that a company pushed me to that, it's like, how are they not self-aware to realize that this would touch on so many emotional buttons for a majority of people in their staff, that like they still went through with it because they had to do it. So like in that instance, like, right. So like in that instance, the race thing definitely comes top of mind. Like, well, he's the black guy at work that just got upset because we didn't acknowledge his name was Travis, and that's not really a racial identifiable name. So on that end, it does have a little bit of an effect. But then, like, one thing that I've always tried to do, that my mom has taught me to do, is like be the best you can possibly be, regardless of race, gender, age. Like when I was triple jumping, it wasn't like, oh, I'm the best African American triple jumper in the state of Delaware. It's like, no. I was the best triple jumper in the state of Delaware my senior season. Like there was no race there. I was just trying to be the best that I could be. So it's tough when it's always in the back of your head. Like, well, do they just see me as this like African American, and like, do they just want to give me a chance because they feel bad? Or do they actually see me for being good at what I do, and they want me because of the value that I bring to the organization? So it's a delicate thing that I'm still working through, but that's
well, you're talking about it now, dude. You're talking about it now, right? You're not keeping it bottled up. And my challenge right now, though, is I'm trying to picture you triple jumping. It's just difficult.
My challenge is I'm trying to see you in Scott's
difficult
Delaware loser shirt.
What do you say? What are you trying to see, Richard?
I was trying to say that I know you're excited that he's from Delaware, because you know.
Oh yeah.
You have a
Fun fact: I was born in Wilmington, Delaware.
You're lying.
Nope. Fun fact: I don't have my wallet here. I'd show you my driver's license. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's where I grew up. I grew up in Wilmington.
My dad was teaching at the University of Delaware when I was born there. I didn't live there very long, only a couple months, and he got transferred to Arizona State. But yeah, I even have a T-shirt. My most famous T-shirt. It says "Delaware is for losers," and I wear it. I wear it all the time, man, and especially at airports and stuff. And like, it gets comments everywhere I go. It's like my favorite shirt. And I tell people that well, I can get away with it because I was born there.
Wow. I'm gonna have to find one of those. That I
gotta try to send you one.
That's crazy. Oh, I didn't know that. But also, thanks for bringing that out of me, both of you, like all three of you. Like, it's one of those things that it takes an interesting set of personalities for me to be able to be comfortable to be able to say something like this. And I know that for the people also listening to this, and all like other ones like me, like the episode that also stuck out to me that you guys did was the one with KD.
Yeah.
And being the only one. And so like that one, I'm like, man, like to hear the stories that he went through, and like to also feel those and not speak out about it. It's like, you know what, it's time. And like even Morgan has helped me come through the storytelling a little bit. So it's just one of those things now to where I'm like, I want to do my share and help other people realize that, one, like this is a safe space. Like sales is a world that you can get into and that, you know, people have evolved with, which I also want to get on before we hop off. Like I really want to get both your takes on the evolution of, like, Kevin went through the index card selling days, and like you guys have I'm sure been through your fair share of evolution. So definitely want to
index cards.
My first job, it was like legit. They handed out index cards, and then you had to go to a website. We printed out a company website, and that was the lead.
I told you this dude is as old as us, man.
When I first met Scott and was running a sales team, we were literally pulling up lists. You know, it was a local play, but we would be pulling up, I don't even think it existed then because it was 2008, or maybe it just started. We were pulling up the equivalent of Yelp for buying puppies. And we would just call down, there was no printing it out. We were selling online ads. And so we would just go find whatever, and real estate agents. Oh, I'm going to go sell to real estate agents in Macon, Georgia, right? All right, well, here's a list of them. And you just call them, right? We didn't even get index cards. Right?
There was no such thing as sales enablement, no such thing as sales ops, no such thing as SDRs. I didn't have a CRM, let alone any other thing in the tech stack.
That's why Scott left me.
I didn't have a headset. I never even had a headset.
Yeah.
You know?
See, and like that was kind of the topic that Travis and I talked a lot about, was like, and it's happening so fast, right? Like the innovation within sales is happening rapidly, whether it's the roles, right? Like all of a sudden I'm seeing chief growth officer, and you're like, that job didn't exist 10 years ago, right?
What does that even mean? I don't even know.
No one knows what it means, right? Like,
is that marketing? Is that sales? Is that both? I don't know.
Kind of both. Yeah. Right. So it's like the roles, the enablement, the ops, like, you know, the data, the tech, like it's happening fast.
Well, even the role, the CRO role is new. Chief Revenue Officer. That's only a couple of years old.
Yep.
And everyone has their own definitions for it. Like a head of sales, like a VP of sales, like it means something different in every single company you go to, right?
Cool. So what's the other evolution question you want to ask?
So I don't know if it's like you could bring us from like Back to the Future to like 2050, or just like what your thoughts have been on the evolution. Like I don't know. I just want y'all to talk about the evolution of sales.
You know what I think the question is there's going to be a lot of things that come out that are going to be just like a fad and fluff, right? There's going to be other things that are coming out that are going to become a staple, and it's going to be like the pinnacle of how you do things. What's maybe one thing you think is a fad and just complete bullshit, and what's another thing you think maybe is going to be here in another 7 to 10 years?
Whew.
I think
dropping fire. That was a good question.
I can
just
tell
made
you,
it up.
I can tell you what is gonna be here, and is going to get better / get worse, in my opinion, is artificial intelligence. And I'm not talking about like sales enablement artificial intelligence. I'm talking sci-fi shit. So you ask me questions about 2050 and beyond and things like that. Like, I very strongly believe that artificial intelligence will catch up and a lot of jobs will just disappear, because you'll be able to have a conversation with some type of AI that can communicate and can think and can recognize emotion and can respond appropriately. And most people think I'm, either stoned or totally out of my mind, but look, I don't see why not. I think I'm not saying that's going to happen in 2 to 5 years. I'm talking 2050, 2100. Like, you trying to tell me that's not going to happen? I don't know, man. I think that's going to happen for sure, right? And so people keep saying stuff like salespeople will always be around because you can't replicate, human emotion and improvisation and things like that. And I'm like, We just haven't figured out how to code that shit yet.
Yep.
And we probably are going to figure out how to code it. So you go way into the future. Like, what's here to stay? AI is here to stay, and it could do a lot of good and it could do a lot of fucking damage.
Scott, there's your next book.
Jesus Christ.
It's a book, or it's the next Scott Leese like sales robot.
Right. Exactly.
I feel so busy all of a sudden.
So I think that the future of things will be, we're going to see things weed out. Like what happens during a recession is that mediocre gets cut. Our friend John Barrows said that the other, he's been saying it a while, is the average salesperson is going to get cut. But there'll be another cycle and people will come back up. I think the enablement side will be interesting. I think video is a really interesting approach because, Zoom has now become a verb, right?
Yeah.
Like this entire thing is made, hey, I'm going to get an Uber. Hey, I'm going to get, I need to take some Tylenol, or, I grew up in the South. Everything was a Coke. You didn't get a Coke. You just said, I'm going to go have a Coke. But what's also interesting is what happens to somebody like Vidyard, right? I just did a session with them and talking about how to use video at different parts of the sales cycle. And I think, it was brilliant. It was really good because I hadn't thought about it that way. So often what ends up happening, at least in the tech sector of sales, we see stuff that's designed to bring in leads because that's what everybody wants first, right? So that'll be an interesting play to see how video plays out in all of this, right? Does all of a sudden Zoom become the people who can beam you somewhere, like in Star Trek, right? Like, why not? Like they went from 10 million users to 200 in 90 days. Yep. And yeah, there's been some hiccups, but come on,
yeah.
We couldn't even, we couldn't even open the National Health Exchange without it crashing in the first 3 hours, right? Like, and that's how good these guys are. So I think that evolution will be interesting to see, because you asked about a specific. I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens with email in the future. Like, how does that evolve? Like, we've been hearing for a while, like, oh, going to kill email, right? And I just don't know. Like, the platform's pretty much the same, right? It works the way it's supposed to work. So the question will become, how will AI, as Scott's point, become into that? Like, how will that piece come in? And we're starting to see that, right? Like, I think the sales lofts and the outreaches and matches of the world are all this data that they've been doing, they now have a chorus, the same thing, gong, the same thing. That's where that AI side in sales is going to come together. At some point, it's going to become one enablement platform, right?
Yep.
On the sales side. The rest of the world, I have no idea, right? When you can buy a car on the internet, which is unheard of even 5 years ago. Who would ever buy a car without going to tape drive?
Hey, you can take this tape right here, go bury it under a tree somewhere, dig it up in 50 years, and we'll see what we got right.
Yeah, I
love it.
mean, I love that too, and
they'll still be around, Scott.
They'll be, well, Kevin might not. Travis will be.
Oh man,
I got to jump, guys. I don't mean to be rude, but
yeah, I was gonna say, I think this is. I didn't realize what time it was, but this has been.
Fabulous, man. I loved it. This was great. I'm glad to do it again, as long as you ask us first.
Yeah.
Episode 1 of season 2.
Yeah.
Episode 1 of season 2. We got to be on, Rich.
We'll be the first repeat guest.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
You're the first duo. You're the first tandem.
There we go.
So here's two firsts. You are the first tandem, and you are the first non-African American.
That's true.
The first 3, and I already said this to Kevin, I was like, yo, I didn't mean to do this to you. We had 3 brothers on back to back to back to back. And I was like, holy shit.
I think you should double down on that. And I think that you could probably get KD and Morgan to do something and help Kevin write some very provocative questions, but that aren't rude or inappropriate.
Yeah.
And have a conversation. You could probably get Keenan to do it. You could probably get, we all, I'm sure KD and Morgan know 2 other people each. Maybe get a African-American woman as well.
That'd be amazing. Yeah.
I think you guys should double down on that, because it's a topic that doesn't get addressed.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. Well, yeah, Kev,
Make it
let's.
happen. You got homework now, dude.
I know. I'm gonna be talking about it in the happy hour. You know that.
It's about time we made some work for him and not just me.
Yeah, facts. No, well, I appreciate y'all. Richard, get off to your next thing. Scott as well, and I'll have in terms of like podcast stuff. The only thing I'm waiting on from you guys is just some of those files, but everything else is already queued up and good to go.
All the files are in the folder.
Oh, they're already there. Okay, so I'll go with those, and then we'll be good to go. And then
you know, I ain't got the files because I don't know what to do with them.
yeah, I know. Every time I ask you for them, you're like, Richard? Question mark.
All right, guys.
All right, guys.
Fun, guys. I would gladly do this again. This was a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time, guys.
Cheers.
Later.
All right, stay safe.
You too.